Hello, and thank you for joining me for this Risk Management for Pastors, the second part in a webinar series. My name is David Fournier. I'm the Vice President for Client Care at Adventist Risk Management, the Seventh-day Adventist Church's risk management and insurance company. So thank you for taking the time to learn more about this topic. The approach that we want to take today, that I want to focus on, is not a deep dive into risk management topics. It is a what I would call helping pastors know what should be taking place in your congregation, helping you know what to look for. If you were to ask yourself, is my church succeeding at risk management? What would that look like? And where can I point my team for resources, for knowledge on how to do risk management at, at our local congregation? You may have appointed a team member to spearhead this. You may have a safety committee. We'll talk a bit more about that. But what would you expect those people to be doing on behalf of the congregation? How are they going to succeed? And how are you going to know the difference, whether it is being ineffective or effective? So thank you for taking the time to spend with me. And let's start back with what we discussed in the part one section. Really set the table in part one, talking about the idea of um, why risk management is so important at our local churches, how the Seventh-day Adventist Church works together, and some of the challenges we face. Sometimes it's easy to think of ourselves as just working with a small congregation in a small town, and we're fairly um, insignificant. It's easy to feel as though what we do doesn't matter, but um, I hope you do understand that everything everyone does matters, and you represent something much larger than yourself because you are part of our denomination, our congregation, our conference, and our church structure. Um, and certainly as a representative of um, not only our denomination, but certainly as a representative of the King, of our Heavenly Father, everything you do, even to the least of these, is what is most important. So I thank you for your ministry and service, and I want you to feel as though um, everything that we do, whether it has to do with, you know, keeping people from tripping over buckled carpet, or helping, uh, assisting visitors into our church when there's ice and snow, is absolutely critical to ministry, and it is ministry. I think of the experience of Jesus on this earth, um, as he went about caring deeply and ministering to people where they were, and very much connected to um, their well-being. He sought to better them wherever he went, and that is our example. So very, very important for us in all aspects of ministry to care about people's well-being. We want them to be safe when they come to fellowship with us. So over the last few years, particularly here in North America, there has been a need for a refocused plan, some initiatives to help us sort of sharpen our pencils of how do we prevent some of the losses that have been taking place. There have been some, there are always sort of your regular losses taking place, and they take place with more frequency, but not as high dollar value. Um, what we would love to see is those to be reduced in frequency as more care is taken of for our people, our visitors, our members, our children, but also there has been an increase in the very high dollar claims that have taken place, which have ended with serious and permanent injury or even death. Um, so the North American division Risk Management Committee asked Adventist Risk Management if we would produce some sort of plan, some sort of way forward that can really help us curb these losses, particularly at the high end. And so the first initiatives were formed. I'll share those with you quickly. Um, those initiatives really were risk management committees, and this is it, the initiative isn't just about committees. What the initiative is, it's about engaging leadership. And this was primarily and specifically about leadership at the conference level, but this also very much applies at every location. For every congregation, every school, every church, we need leadership involvement. We do not achieve effective risk management when we simply delegate all responsibility for it to one person, and then we don't listen to that person anymore. We just say, hey, go off and accomplish this for us. Risk management takes place across all ministries and needs to start with leadership. So leadership needs to be engaged. And I will move through these quickly because we did cover them in the previous webinar. Removing 15 passenger vans. Certainly church policy is that we don't have these vans anymore. They're still showing up here and there. They've not been completely removed. If you know of a van being used, whether it's even being rented or borrowed, please stand firm to remove that van from use. We have had enough deaths and injuries with these vans that we know better. We have known better, and there's no excuse for us using those vehicles at this point. Facility inspections, we'll talk about that actually quite a bit today, and emergency planning. That's where we really engage with understanding what's going on with our particular facility, and then emergency planning is helping us to make a plan of how are we going to respond at this location in the event of one type of emergency or another. In 2018, we refreshed our initiative list, still retaining much of the 2017, in fact, all of the 2017 initiatives are still built within the framework, but with an additional focus on particularly equipping and sharing information with pastors as that key leader who may not have been exposed to the resources, tools, and information, certainly in their studies in school, may not have been mentored by somebody who knew a lot about risk management, want to share more information with pastors more effectively. And this webinar is one of those pieces. So we want to get to that. Secondly, there on the list, you see reviewing and updating Pathfinder knowledge and practices. As you probably are well aware, we have the International Camporee happening next year in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And that is quite an event. And there will be people and clubs traveling from all around the world, certainly all around this country, the US and Canada, to attend that event. And that's really, really exciting. But with that amount of travel, all the logistics involved, there are some very serious risks that come with that. We want to make sure that the leadership teams of all of our Pathfinder clubs are fully up to date and knowledgeable about all of their risk management processes and practices and rules that they have within the Pathfinder club system, particularly before they get started planning for Oshkosh. Then we talked about facility inspections and emergency planning. Again, major initiatives for 2018, and we'll look at those more closely. I mentioned this briefly, and I just want to highlight it again. The purpose of these webinars is not to ask pastors to do this yourselves. It's not to task you with yet more responsibilities that you have to take on. The goal here is to give you information that helps to ensure that the right people are doing the right things. So what you will want to do is you'll want to have someone in your congregation who's been appointed to be the safety officer. And this is somebody who can really spearhead a lot of the activities that should take place in regards to risk management. Now, I'm not asking you to just delegate everything to them. What I'm saying is, here's somebody who can lead others with your support and with your involvement to some degree uh, in actually accomplishing some of these key functions, which would include self-inspections. This is one of the key things that they can really do. We have a resource on our website, I'll show you that in just a moment, that will help them accomplish this. Self-inspections are one of the best tools that you can use because it really sets, um, it puts your eyes and ears everywhere throughout your facility. And if you do this on a regular basis, you will always find something new that needs to be corrected. However, you will be moving positively forward to really keep your place safe and up to code and up to snuff. So the next item there is emergency planning. Somebody needs to lead out in that area. Accident investigation, that is really all about understanding what's taking place. So whether or not a claim arises because somebody slipped and fell and hurt their knee, uh, maybe a claim doesn't arise out of that. But it'd be good if somebody was noticing that this is taking place, making a record that it took place, so that you're either understanding what types of little accidents are happening. Um, Maybe the same accident is happening repeatedly and there's a fix for that. Or perhaps a claim does arise out of this accident quite a bit later, and now you have some sort of objective record of what actually took place other than just the accusation of the person who alleges that they were harmed. So important to have some sort of clear, simple accident investigation process in place. This person can help with that. Lastly on the list here is seasonal maintenance. There's so many losses that are tied to maintenance, uh, whether it's rolled carpet that's just not being cared for, or frayed carpet. Um, it could be a lack of attention to the gutters and the roof area. Sometimes roofs are not cared for long enough that once some sort of storm comes through, it just the storm is able to wreak all kinds of havoc on that roof. Well, was it the storm that damaged the roof, or was it because the roof had been weakened over time and it had never been repaired and it wasn't being maintained? This could be a problem. So you obviously don't want to just leave one person to have to do all of this by themselves. You need that cross-departmental support. For many churches, a good solution is to actually set a risk management committee. Again, this is an opportunity for your key leaders to show that this is important here in our church, and we are going to do some things, and it's going to make this a safer place because we care about people's well-being. And there may be some key individuals who really are instrumental in helping to formulate a church emergency plan. For example, if you were to be planning, let's say, a fire drills as part of your church emergency plan, you may want to have perhaps the children's ministries director on your committee, because they're going to need to help communicate and coordinate with the various children's Sabbath schools, uh, particularly if you plan to have your drill during that time. So you want to have some key individuals who are going to help make this a success and a positive experience. Um, Other things they can do is to make sure that proper maintenance is taking place, the inspection program. Um, I've actually heard of churches taking that self-inspection model, and rather than having one person just go do it all in one, you know, uh, afternoon or a couple hours or something, where they go through the entire facility from one end to the other. Some churches have taken the approach of, okay, well, let's actually split this up. You take this section and you take that section and you take that section, and we'll all meet back here in an hour or so after having done a thorough review. That way you have more eyes and ears engaged, more people learning how to do this. It's a real positive. For many churches, we also recommend that the risk management committee may be involved in the ensuring that your church has a child protection plan. Again, there's a model protection plan on our website that's free for you to use. Um, it doesn't have to be incredibly complex to build the plan. Uh, where it gets certainly more challenging is ensuring that you've actually implemented the plan, helping you may need to change some practices, some behaviors in how things are run. Uh, a little change management can be challenging, um, but there is a model there, and working as a team, I think you have a better chance of actually getting that implemented. Where you have deacons who are aware of the child protection policies, the Sabbath school leaders are conducting themselves as expected, where the leadership team knows how things are supposed to work and are holding people accountable to do that. Um, Another thing they may be involved in, depending on how you've organized your church structure there, is reviewing activity and outing plans. Again, we have free resources on our website that help with activity and outing planning, ensuring that you have thought through permission forms, transportation issues. Is this something that is already covered by insurance, or do we need to go get an additional endorsement? Do we need a certificate of insurance? A lot of questions that should be asked before we just rush out the door and go do whatever the activity is. So several things to think about there. But this becomes your team that helps to make sure that risk management is implemented across the ministries of your church. So in this webinar, I want to focus on physical plant and life safety. We will then follow up. Our next webinar will be about child protection, and then activity planning and transportation. Um, so let's look here at physical plant and life safety. I've already mentioned this quite a few times, the self-inspection form. And the form you see here is, I think, 10 or 11 pages long, and really has it broken out by different location types. So there's a section for the baptistry, for the exterior of the building with your parking lots and sidewalks. There's a section for the kitchen, the mother's room, Sabbath school classrooms, the sanctuary, the typical different types of the church. We really do encourage that this take place, a full inspection of your facility at least once a year. I say at least because I think a much more regular view of your location is even more effective. Things can change quickly. The way this form works is it really just gives you various items that you need to look for. And it is written such that if you answer yes, there's not a problem. If you answer no, there typically needs to be a solution to that. So that we've tried to phrase our questions in that way. And there may be many things that just don't apply. You may not have a mother's room. Well, then it doesn't apply. It's not a problem you have to solve. Um, but we've just built this as a resource and a tool for you. This is a way for you to proactively show that you are engaged in caring for your church facility and the people that attend there. So we do encourage regular documentation of this. The conferences have been asked to actually implement an audit process. As part of their local church audit, we've asked conferences to include a few questions in their conference audit. Again, this information doesn't come back to us specifically, but we want them to be measuring how many churches are conducting a self-inspection, how many have included and nominated a safety officer? How many have done emergency planning and conducted some sort of drills? We'll talk about that a little bit more um, later. So I would encourage you to make use of this resource. Have your safety officer do an inspection. You may want to join them for that. And I challenge you, conduct at least one self-inspection by July 30 of this year. You may want to do another one before the end of the year, but let's move forward. Let's try to create some measurable impact with this. You'll be surprised with what you discover by using this checklist. To look around, you may find that there are exit lights that are not lighted anymore and haven't been for some time. You may find that your exit map may be out of date and is not accurate or effective anymore. You may find a lot of items being stored in a hallway or against an exit. You may discover all kinds of things that need to be remedied. Most of these will probably be easily remedied just by cleaning up your storage and by putting things where they go. There may be some simple things that just need some maintenance, touch up of paint, put a nail into that board, that kind of thing. You may also find some things that are more serious. You may find that your fire extinguishers are completely out of date and have not been recharged within, on schedule. So I do encourage you to go through that process. The worst you will find is information that will give you tools to move forward. I think it's worse to have those same things not taking place and not know it than to know it and be able to at least start the planning process of how are we going to get from where we are today to where we need to be in the future. So I challenge you to actually do the self-inspection and then do something with those recommendations. Even if it's only making a plan over time of how those recommendations are going to be accomplished, get started. There's no time like the present. So physical plan and life safety is this is the kind of thing you're going to find other within that self-inspection form. You're going to be looking for tripping hazards, whether that's rolled carpet or a sidewalk that's just really out of sorts. You see the photo here. I've seen all kinds of interesting things since I've been looking for them. Another area that it tends to pop up quite a bit is electrical issues. Perhaps there's not GFCI outlets close to the sinks in the kitchens or the bathrooms, or you have the, I've heard all kinds of clever names for this, but the Franken plugs, where there's just so many items being plugged into something that's just not designed for that amount of plugs to be plugged in there. You end up with electrical fires. If it's not clean in that area, you end up with dust next to overloaded circuits. It starts to be a recipe for disaster, and the kind of losses that we experience do reflect that. Other areas I've already mentioned, like mother's rooms and kitchens, are used frequently. They're not always maintained as frequently. Look through that mother's room for those little items that little kids want to put in their mouths. Make sure that if there's a crib in there, that it's fully, functional and not falling apart. We've found just on those times where Adventist Risk Management is visiting a facility, we've found cribs where it was largely broken. There were hazards where a kid could have rolled out or trapped themselves between bars on the crib. Found rocking chairs for mothers where half of the leg rocker was missing, and I don't know why they wouldn't have just fallen over as soon as somebody sat in the chair. So when you have those kinds of items that are clearly either broken or defective, I encourage you, remove them and destroy them immediately. You don't want to then have somebody else pick it up and carry it off and try to use it and say, hey, I got this at the church. Get rid of it and just um, remove that as a risk going forward. I hope that you were aware that in March 24, this last Sabbath for when I'm recording this, um, of this year, we had Safety Sabbath, which was a day of emphasis, really asking churches to engage in emergency planning, conduct a drill of either active shooter or a fire drill. There's a number of drills that you could conduct. Our school system has been pretty good about conducting drills because they're required to. Our churches have really struggled with the idea of including this and um, involving people in this kind of an activity during our church services, whether that's during Sabbath school or between services or the divine service. We've been reluctant to go there. Um, but I encourage you to rethink that idea, because really this is about caring for people's well-being. It's about involving them in something that, while practical, will be very much needed in the event of a real emergency. So when an emergency happens, that's not the time to start figuring out, okay, what are we going to do for these people with disabilities? How are we going to get them out quickly? Or this elderly person who's not moving quickly? No, you need to have thought through that ahead of time. When an emergency happens during the Sabbath school, are all the parents going to go rushing downstairs trying to find their kids, or are they going to know what the plan is and what's expected of both them and all of the children and the children's ministries leaders, where they can effectively, they will be leaving by this exit, you leave by that exit, and you can meet outside. Um, it's really important that that planning take place ahead of time. And if for your church you need to take baby steps, take baby steps. Get it in writing. Do a tabletop exercise. Grow into it, but do something. I want to share with you just a quick resource video that we prepared that was used to promote Safety Sabbath this year. While we did focus on March 24 as sort of that key day of Safety Sabbath, we encourage you to schedule these kinds of activities more than once a year, and we encourage you to do it throughout the year. So not something to only be done on March 24, something to be done perhaps multiple times throughout the year. Let me share with you just this short video that I think you are free to use and is available on our website as one of the resources. So just a short, quick video to help get people thinking about sort of the practical scenario there with either an active shooter, fire, or other drills as well that we have available. And again, we have all the resources for that on our website, with planning guides, with resources for children and children's ministries, really trying to make this as accessible as possible, and also available in multiple languages. So we hope and encourage you to use those. Just a few notes on this as we consider how you would start the emergency planning process. I really encourage you to actually start with coordinating with local law enforcement. Make friends there. Hopefully you have some first responders who are members of your congregation. That would be fantastic. They could be a very good resource for you. but also reaching out to your local first responders, whether that's the police department or um, EMTs, fire department, that sort of thing. Create a relationship. Ask for their advice. Ask for their resources. Ask them how they would like you to respond in a given situation. They are professionals at exactly this. So make use of that, your primary resource for emergency planning. And then as you go further, you will want to learn the signs of a potentially volatile situation and how you might actually start developing strategies that would prevent some of these types of scenarios, thinking particularly of the active shooter scenario that is definitely on people's minds today. Um, so what might you do in your church? I promote a model that starts with a real combination approach of combining hospitality and in layers for our churches so that we can start to see what's coming onto our campus from out in the parking lot, at the door, in the lobby, before somebody ever makes it into our sanctuary or classroom. We should have a pretty good idea of who they are and what's going on. If there are warning signs, we should be able to communicate that effectively to someone who can begin the response process. Certainly letting law enforcement know, um, and key leaders, so that there's a response in place. Um, we'll look at some of the key steps for survival when faced with an active shooter. Um, and I think a really important piece of this is learning, and again, going back to the first point, what are expectations of law enforcement during their response, whether it's a fire, active shooter, or whatever the emergency might be. And again, as you do your emergency planning, I encourage you to think of what are the most likely scenarios and the most devastating scenarios in your location. Um, some locations need to consider wildfire. Other locations, that's just not, very likely at all. They're more likely to have a regular fire. Um, some locations may be close to a chemical factory or a nuclear facility where you need to be aware of that, and your planning needs to factor that type of thing in. Some locations will be close to, in a hurricane area. Other places are going to be dealing with tornadoes. Your emergency plan needs to reflect the realities and the risks that you face. So specifically talking about the active shooter situation, there is a great deal of good training on this, particularly online. There's good resources, information. It's a growing and changing field, but it is there is good information to be had. There's information specific for houses of worship. So I encourage you to make use of that. We do have some of that information on our website. There are other organizations as well that you can find videos, documents, and good planning materials. I recently took an online course that I thought was particularly effective from an organization called Alice, and they were able to customize their training specific to a house of worship scenario. So I encourage you to get out there, again, coordinate with your local first responders, and uh, learn those steps and the methodologies that you can take to see a problem arising and how you're going to respond as well. I mentioned this in a sort of the preamble that I do believe our churches need to conduct a systematic accident investigation whenever something takes place. So even if it's not so serious that a claim is going to be filed because of this accident, um, I I would encourage you to have your safety officers still document the the incident. This is not a claim form. This is not, it is not necessarily saying, you know, that a claim will arise out of this, but this is good documentation for you to have as you track what is taking place at your facility. So if somebody keeps tripping on the third step um, of the stairs, down to the fellowship hall, well, okay, that's starting to be a trend. Maybe we need to get something done about that. And again, this is useful information if for some reason that incident turns into a claim later on. Um, really encourage the individual, stay very objective. Don't make, promises or comments about whose fault something is. This is just about, hey, I want to know what happened so that if we need to follow up with something in the future, we have good information. And so it's a very simple form that we've created. Again, that's available for free on our website. Much like if you look at the back of your auto insurance card, it probably has some good advice there about not blaming people or um, telling someone or assuming responsibility for something that you may not have all of the information and details as to why that accident took place. You may think you know, but let it just stay objective with the facts that are in front of you. So some encouragement to avoid some pitfalls there. Uh, Remember, you represent your organization. Represent that organization with kindness, but also have a healthy respect for your organization and yourself as well, that you don't assume responsibilities that you don't have. That really concludes this brief webinar. Again, next time we will be talking about child protection and then activity planning and transportation on the last webinar in this particular series. We will continue to do other webinars as well. As we leave, here's my challenge to you. Here's your little to-do assignment list. Make sure that your church has a safety officer and perhaps a safety committee as well in order to achieve these responsibilities, the self-inspection, the emergency planning. Make sure that the maintenance is being done in a regular, responsible way, in a proactive way at your church. If you haven't done the emergency drill on March 24 of this year, that's okay. There's nothing preventing you from accomplishing that a little later in the year, or perhaps several times throughout the year. I encourage you to get an emergency drill done this year. Also, complete at least one self-inspection of your facility before July 30. So let's do that. Let's get out there. Let's take a look around. Let's use the tool provided on our website for self-inspection of a church. And by the way, we also have a tool for self-inspection of a school and a camp location as well for our summer camp type facilities. So really encourage you to do that. Again, let's try to do that before July 30. That way, perhaps we can start to get a sense of how many churches are doing this across the North American division, which will be very, very good as we try to be able to tell a story of how the Seventh-day Adventist Church is really moving forward and being more effective, taking effective measures to implement risk management practices that will prevent those large losses we talked about earlier. And lastly, and certainly not least, I encourage you to really review and ensure your Pathfinder Club leaders are on top of and refreshed about the conference guidelines, the Pathfinder Club rules, their risk management within the club itself. So thank you again for taking the time to participate in this quick webinar, and I hope to talk to you again next time. Take care.